All right, guys, time for another really important, really critical lecture. I mean, this one's probably top 5 most important in the entire course. So pay attention. I wish someone had taught this to me when I was first learning because it really took a while for me to wrap my head around. So it's the idea of connecting multiple data tables. Now, consider this screenshot of a data model. Looks very similar to ours. In fact, it's almost identical to ours except for one thing, which is this returns table. So in this case, we've loaded a second data table named returns, which contains records of returns by date, product, and store. So you've got a quantity field in here, which is the quantity of returned products, which differs from the quantity field in the transactions table, which is the quantity of transactions purchased. So one thing you'll notice is that this table can connect up to each lookup table just like the transactions table did. It's got a return date, it's got a product ID, it's got a store ID. Now there's just one glaring exception, which is that there's no customer ID. So there's no way we can connect this returns table to our customer lookup table. Now what that means is that we can analyze data across both of our data tables, transactions and returns, in the same power pivot, but only if we filter or segment the data using lookups that are common to both of them. And this will be much more clear once we get into the power pivot section of the course. But in other words, we know which product was returned, we know which store it was returned to, and we know which date the return occurred. But what we don't know is which customer was responsible. So if we tried to filter our view, to break down data or to filter it by customer country or customer name, we won't be able to retrieve any values from that returns table. And any calculated fields that incorporate that returns table will give us the incorrect answers because of that lack of a relationship. So, big yellow important box here. You never ever try to connect data tables directly to each other. You always connect them indirectly via shared lookup tables. And the reason you can't connect them together is because you're trying to force many-to-many relationships. And there's no way to create those relationships in any way that makes logical sense. So for me, as I was learning Power Query and Power Pivot and DAX, this was like the biggest groundbreaking moment for me, where I realized I was trying to ingest multiple data tables into a data model, and I was trying to force them to stack together by creating extra placeholder columns, and just getting frustrated because it was a really manual and tedious process. It felt really inefficient, which looking back, it was. So as soon as this concept of connecting data tables indirectly by sharing common lookup tables, as soon as that concept clicked, it was a complete game changer for me. So this is another one of those slides where if it's not quite clear, if it's still a little fuzzy, rewatch it over and over, reach out to me, let's talk, because it's critical that you understand this stuff. So surprise, surprise, we actually do have a returns data set, a CSV file. So let's jump back to our model, and we're going to actually wire up that data table just like you see here. Okay, so I'm in my Food Mart data model workbook. Just going to do the little Excel shortcut to jump to the actual workbook. And we're going to go back to our trusted old friend Power Query. It's been a while, I know. We're going to go from File, and from here, we're going to grab the only remaining table that we haven't worked with yet, which is Food Mart returns 1997 through 1998. So let's go ahead and import that file. Here's our preview. Go ahead and edit to get back into the query editor. And now you know the drill. Let's look at our table name. This is a little bit long and sloppy. Our other data table is named just transactions. So to be consistent, why don't we shorten this to just returns? And there we go. And now looking at data types, we've got a return date formatted as a date, product ID, store ID, quantity, all whole numbers. That looks great. And we won't actually do any sort of manipulation or shaping or transformation of this data. It's pretty much ready to roll. So close and load to. Connection, data model, load. And here we see it loading up. Looks like we've got 7,000 rows of returns data. Let's pop back into our data model. And there we go. It's populated automatically in our diagram view as a new table object. And I'm going to drag it down here right next to transactions. And all we need to do now is just drag out each valid relationship that we've got. So return date to calendar date, product ID to product ID, store ID to the store ID. And note this will flow all the way through to region, just like it did for transactions. And then we're done because we don't have a customer ID. We can't connect it. So this is really the best we can do. And there you have it. This is going to be more clear, and the implications of what we're doing are going to become a bit more tangible as soon as we dive into the Power Pivot section, which is where we'll actually start analyzing and exploring this data, just like we would with normal pivot. So stay tuned for that. Good stuff to follow.